welcome to this very special conversation. I'm joined by Bijayant Panda, who is BJP National Vice President and also chairing the Select Committee on the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code Bill 2025. Welcome to NDTV Profit, sir. I would like to start by asking you, what are the key recommendations the Select Committee has given, which you presented in the Lok Sabha?
Let me first give a little bit of context. You see, for many decades, economists, investors, and many other stakeholders had been asking for a bankruptcy code because we had the situation in India where companies went under, but they hung around in limbo. They were neither closed down nor they were running properly, and it was a real drag on the economy. So the IBC, the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code Bill, which was first passed in 2016, in 9 years has had a very dramatically positive effect on the Indian economy. So in this decade, you've seen a large number of companies get rehabilitated. There have been resolution packages with new management, new promoters. There have been some that couldn't get resolution, get liquidated. But by this process, in the last few years, every year about 50,000 to 60,000 crore rupees has been recovered. It's been coming back into the Indian economy. So remember, a decade ago, the NPA situation in the banks, the non-performing assets, was huge. Now, this has dramatically brought down the NPAs because every year 50, 60,000 crore being recovered. This has been very, very much a strength of the Indian economy. You can see that the Indian banking sector is much healthier today, even relative to other countries. You can see that the Indian economy has become the fastest growing large economy, and IBC has had a big role to play in that. So in the course of these few years, there have been a few small amendments, but there were demands for many other amendments. And therefore, this proposed bill was a massive overhaul with 68 amendments. And this overhaul has several priorities. I would say the top priority has been the timelines, because resolutions and liquidations are taking 2 years, a little bit more than that. That's very long. In the original act, it was supposed to be in less than a year, but the timelines were suggestive. Like in many previous laws, the timelines were may. Now they have become shall, and they've become very strict. And each stage of the process also has a timeline. So the biggest change, which we have vetted in this bill and we have also approved and added a little bit to it, is that the timelines will be strict and resolutions will happen much faster in less than a year. There are a few other important, I'll just mention one more because there are several such important aspects. One very important aspect is the clean slate principle. Now, right from the beginning, the Act was very clear that when a company goes through a resolution, there's a new owner, they bid, and as per the bidding process, they take it over. That should be their liability. All other liabilities are extinguished and there should not be any claims. Nevertheless, there used to be claims from state government entities, from some central government entities. There have been Supreme Court judgments saying very clearly that that can't be the case because the IBC makes it very clear that after the bidding process, whatever is the amount of the resolution, that's it. Everything else is a clean slate. Now, this is codified in this amended version of the IBC. The clean slate principle is made very clear, reiterated. It was there from the beginning, and it will apply to pending cases as well as the upcoming ones.
But I would like to ask on the first important change which the Select panel recommended on reducing the timeline. Because of course there are cases which dragged on for years, and of course it's impacting the valuation and everything related to that setup. So I wanted to understand that this has been the demand, but what's the rationale behind it? Because if you see 9 years of IBC, this policy never really taken off the way it should have been.
No, I don't agree, because like I said, if you look at the results, many hundreds of companies which were in limbo have either gone through resolution and are now functioning, or they have been wound up, liquidated, and the recoveries of the banks, of course, there are more recovery when there is a resolution and less recovery when there is a liquidation, but the recoveries have been 50,000 crores to 60,000 crores every year for the last several years. So it is absolutely wrong to say that it hasn't taken off. It has taken off in a very big way. But the thing is, how do you make it even better? So that is why the timelines were very important. Look, the timelines were there earlier, but suggestive. Now they have become mandatory. And that's the very important thing. For example, between the filing of a resolution plan and the listing of it in the NCLT, sometimes there used to be a long delay. Now it has been limited to 14 days. And the reason for that is, see, there were some genuine difficulties also. If the paperwork was not filed properly, it used to go back and forth. Now there is a portal, and the filing process itself requires the documents to be uploaded. Otherwise, the filing will not be accepted online. And so there is no real reason to keep it hanging any further. That's why no subjectivity, hard timelines.
But Mr. Panda, don't you agree the fact that if you want to dispose of the case, much quicker, you need to have that infrastructure also in place. And somewhere it's lacking. You have very limited NCLAT and NCLT. How this bill is going to address that, and any of your recommendation is related on those aspects, is addressing those aspects.
You've raised a very important point. In fact, there are now 63 benches of the NCLT and the adjudicating and the appellate body. Now, there have been a large number of cases backlogged for a variety of reasons. Some of the amendments out of the 68 that are being proposed in this revised version of the bill are going to address that in a very big way. So, for example, earlier what used to happen to prevent agglomeration of market power, the bidders had to go to the CCI, the Competition Commission of India, to get a clearance that such a takeover or such a merger would not create market concentration. Now, what has happened now is that only the winning bidder will go to CCI instead of all the bidders. So the backlog of getting the Competition Commission of India clearance before the NCLT proceedings could happen will dramatically reduce. Now, apart from this bill is only to change the provisions of the law, but separately there are plans in the government to create a number of new benches, quite a large number of new benches, and also to improve the infrastructure. So I think it's a very valid point that you've raised, and that is getting addressed.
Okay. Now, how the process would go from here? The select committee have given its report. So whether now Ministry of Corporate Affairs will going to review that, when could we expect that bill coming up in the session and, come up for passage and consideration?
So it should be passed in the budget session. But let me explain. So when there are very major bills or very major revisions like in the IBC, it comes to a select committee. And, I must point out, this is one of the parts of our parliamentary system that doesn't get enough media coverage, is that we had many parties represented in the government and opposition. And it was a very cooperative effort. There was every member put in a lot of effort, and we had dozens of stakeholders and hundreds of recommendations. All of that has translated into many changes that we have recommended. So this cooperative effort is something that was very important. Now, we laid it in Parliament yesterday, and it requires a little time for the ministry to go through our recommendations, then take it to Cabinet for approval, and then bring it back to Parliament for moving and passage. Now, this session only has 1 day left, so it's not going to happen in this session. But in the intervening month and a half, all the background work should be done by the ministry. So I expect this to be moved and passed in the budget session.
Okay. Usually, typically, and we've been reporting about all those bills, relevant bills, it takes a lot of efforts to bring consensus. I have not seen that dissent note neither in your income tax, which you chaired, and even in this IBC. Is it difficult to arrive at consensus? What all efforts goes into that?
I think I've been very fortunate. These are highly technical subjects, and this is something I'm glad that everybody has worked in national interest. Nobody was looking at it from their own personal perspectives. And there was a very cooperative atmosphere. And the way the committee ran, everybody had opportunity to raise their voice, to raise their topic and have their voice heard.
I think that's the part of the consultation. If you're not raising and put forth your views, then what is the point of having that extensive, consultation approach?
We did have extensive consultations, including, as I said, the stakeholders included industry associations, they included accountants and lawyers and industries and MSMEs. By the way, there are provisions in this bill for MSMEs, the small sector, to make it easier for them when they are going through an IBC process. The owner will continue to be in the management, and there will be a pre-packaged approved plan so that they don't have to go through that same level of scrutiny and paperwork, because smaller companies don't have those resources.
Something that a government actually given during the COVID time, remember, that you don't need to go through the entire process, and that has now become the part of.
So for the MSMEs, there is a pre-packaged process. And secondly, the barrier required to get consensus of the creditors is lower, which makes it very simple. So 51% instead of 66%. So it's easier for MSMEs. But yes, I'm very happy, and I must compliment all the members of the committee across the board who contributed for it.
This one talks around this revamped IBC bill, I would say, is that it quite suggesting a creditor-led insolvency, which also somewhere means that it emphasizes on out-of-court settlement sort of thing. You think that's the way to make it a successful tool towards, bankruptcy and insolvency sort of?
Yes, this is a very major development in this bill, but it's not out of court. It still has to go through the process. Let me explain how. You see, in the past, many companies went bad because they defaulted and no action was taken for a long time. Now, the requirements in the law are very clear. Once an NPA happens, it immediately has to be filed. But, in some other countries like the US or Singapore and other countries, even before a company is in default, if it is heading in that direction, then they can find solutions. So that was part of the thinking behind this. And the creditor-led resolution plan basically means that as a company gets into default situation, it is ultimately the creditors have to take a call. There is a committee of creditors, COC, which is the sort of the supreme body approving the resolution plan to take it to the NCLT. So now, if the creditors themselves, instead of just being a passive part of the resolution process, if they take the initiative where they decide what all steps they can do and quickly resolve the problem, so that also helps to cut short the time required and the approval process of the creditors. It becomes streamlined and much faster, but it still has to go to the NCLT to get that stamp of approval.
How confident are you that these suggestions and the bill, which is being proposed, and have you mentioned that it's expected to be in the budget session? So, how this will change the entire landscape of resolution process? What could companies expect?
I'll tell you. So, there are several other aspects which I have not gone into.
Yeah, but overarching, what is the...
So, for example, now for the first time, there will be group insolvency, because there are groups where one company is in bankruptcy, that others are not, but there are assets and resources available. So the group insolvency is one aspect that comes in. The other aspect will be cross-border. It's a very complicated situation because India has its own laws, other countries have its own laws, there are treaties sometimes. So all of that will now evolve. Now, in answer to your question, the biggest difference will be, of course, the speed. Instead of taking the 600 or 700 days it now takes to resolve, this will happen in less than a year's time. Every time there is any delay beyond the mandated timeline, the written explanations, justifications will have to be given. So the time will come down. But what will that lead to? I expect it will lead to a much larger number of recoveries, amount of recoveries. So as I said, last few years, it's been 50,000 to 60,000 crores every year that is being recovered instead of being caught up in loss-making, defaulting situations. I expect that 50,000 to 60,000 crore number to go up substantially because the turnaround time will be much faster.
To how much? Is there any estimation there?
I don't want to make a guess. It will depend. There will be, I suppose, it'll take a little bit of time for this new process to set into place. All I can say is that I expect substantial reduction in time for resolution in the IBC process and substantial increase in recoveries. I don't want to give a number.
A short question, and the last one actually, that if the timeline is not abided by, then is there any sort of enforcement action or any sort of accountability, which is also this? Are you suggesting there on that front?
In law, traditionally in older laws that we inherited, most of the clauses used to read as may. That means it is left to the subjectivity of the civil servant or the person in office or the bench. And sometimes it has been interpreted may shall mean shall, but not always. So that subjectivity changes, and now it is shall. And every time, that word shall in law makes a huge difference as opposed to the word may. So the timeline is hard. It is mandatory. It is not subjective to anybody's decisions or whims. Also, as I said, every time any particular phase of the timeline is somehow exceeded, then a written justification will need to be given. So that puts a lot of pressure on the people involved. And of course, there are certain other clauses and conditions which will ensure this.
Thank you so much, Mr. Panda, for sharing your deep insight, and that will definitely help understanding the bill and the impact of this whole revamped bill on corporates and overall resolution plan. Thank you so much speaking to us.
Thank you.